What is this?
I don't think they're gonna be the brain surgery.
Can I sit wherever I want?
Oh, sorry.
Yep.
I know, since I'm over.
That's okay. Let me think. Fine.
I'll
Is
move
this
over,
her?
So I'm not sitting all by
Yes.
myself. Sit here. Good morning.
Howdy. Morning. Okay. Does anybody have a hard copy
Of what?
of the agenda? Good morning. It's now 10 o'clock on May 2nd, 2023. And this is the City of Isle Palms Public Safety Committee meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that the press and the public have been duly notified of the meeting in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act. Next item on the agenda is approval of previous meetings minutes of April 4th. Is there a motion to approve?
So move.
Second.
Any changes, corrections, anything? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Next item, citizens' comments. Nicole?
Actually, before you do that, you do have a special meeting set of minutes to also approve.
Okay,
I wasn't sure, I didn't say anything because I wasn't sure if you were doing them on separately on purpose, so.
okay, that's fine. What date was that?
April 18th, it's right,
Is there a motion to approve the minutes of April 18th?
So move.
Second.
Any changes, corrections? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Mr. Klaus is the only person who's signed up to speak for citizens'
Okay.
comments.
Mr. Klaus?
Al Klaus, 3 Grand Pavilion. After 4 requests, we are still waiting on written assurances regarding enforcement of the 925 current noise ordinance regarding amplified music, which is the core of this situation. The lack of enforcement has evolved into a legal nuisance by the Sweetgrass Inn per 925I1 and 2. Question: where is the sound study from the resort? What is the reason we do not have a copy of the results? They were very open regarding providing us a copy. Now I must say very guarded. Is there something in said study they do not want us to see? The echo effect. Sunday around noon, I'm working on my front porch. A number of you have been on my front porch. I suddenly hear amplified music which more than meets the plainly audible, unquote, definition, A11, in the current proposed noise ordinance. Clearly in violation of the current noise ordinance 925B and C regarding amplified music. The resort miserably attempts to manage the volume of their music in relation to wind speed, direction, and distance from an unwelcome target, such as us, failing to understand who their audience is. The above is the reason to require measurements 10 foot from the source of the sound. Simple terms, we do not want to hear, be annoyed, and be disturbed by the resort's amplified music, which is a clear violation of the current noise ordinance. None. We do not want to hear their large event crowds, the after party, the fireside chat party, the hot tub rubber ducky party, and all the hooping and hollering which accompanies said events. How many noise complaints has the resort alleged against us? How many? Said resort's visible south property line is well defined. Said resort does not own the fire lane. Last we looked, the resort does not own 6 properties on 57th Avenue or GP3, which are complainants in this situation. The resort does not have the right to negatively impact the livability of the above. The resort's behavior is egregious. No enforcement has escalated into a legal nuisance, which we request said section be reinstated into the new proposed noise ordinance. which has previously been carved out for some reason. Permits for additional amplification, Section X in the proposed, permits for additional amplification appear to be crafted by the resort's legal counsel. The smell test, in our opinion, someone is telling someone to not enforce the noise ordinance as it relates to the Sweetgrass Inn. Why? We desire a restrictive noise ordinance to improve livability for us and our community, not to be a product of a graph which charts decibels analyzed by IOP math. We believe decibels are only part of the solution. A complainant's overall livability would prevail over a decibel reading. The onus is on the perpetrator, not the complainants. We do not believe owning and operating a hotel has inherent rights to disturb the neighborhood. They should have thought about this before they built the damn thing. Our proposed decibels, residential and commercial, 55 dBAs, 10 a.m. to 10 p.m., 50 dBAs, 10 p.m. to 10 a.m. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. That's
That's the
it.
only one. Yes, sir.
Very good. We will go to old business, item A, discussion and consideration of changes to the noise ordinance. Desiree?
Yes, in your packets, you have the most recent version of the noise ordinance that we have been working on with the committee for several months now. I would hope that we could go through section by section and get feedback from the committee before a revised draft is provided back to council for action. Before we do, I do want to take an opportunity to address some comments that have been made that are not accurate regarding enforcement and regarding the resort drafting the ordinance. The ordinance has been drafted by the city attorney. We have made changes to the noise ordinance based on the discussions that we have had with this committee and with city council. And the changes that have been made have been voted on by this committee. The resort has not drafted. Their representative has attended meetings in the past and has made recommendations about language, but any changes that have been made have been voted on by this committee. The staff has not inserted any changes to the ordinance based on their advice or their direction, other than the direction from this committee. I'll also want to have an opportunity to ask Chief Gornett to speak on the enforcement piece. Every time a call is made to dispatch or the police department regarding a noise complaint, the police department dispatches an officer to address the situation. Obviously, there are times when citations have been issued. There are other times when warnings have been issued, but all violations have been documented as either founded or unfounded. So just wanted to clarify that the enforcement is happening by the police department. It may be that not every time a citation, every time an officer responds, a citation is issued, just like with any other complaint. So if y'all, if y'all would like to hear from the chief about the enforcement piece, I think it would be good to correct that information on the record.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Good morning. The police department tracks all of our responses for livability concerning short-term rental or businesses in general or just residential. And so I will say in the past that was not tracked in the best manner, but we have definitely increased on that and done a better job. Every time a police officer is dispatched to a livability concern, whether the officer issues a ticket or not, they complete a form that says that the violation is either founded or unfounded. And then that gets turned over to our livability officer. We are tracking complaints on this specific location that we're talking about and have more than one violation where it's been founded. And then the steps would follow the procurement, or the, not procurement, the city policy pertaining to business license. When they reach a certain point, we turn it over to the business license official for suspension or revocation, and then it would go to a hearing with city council.
That's 5 Founded citations, correct?
Not citations, just founded complaints.
Founded
Whether there's a ticket or
complaints.
not issued, it's just 5 founded violations. Yes,
How
sir.
many have been issued to regards to Sweetgrass Inn?
This year, there's been 4.
4.
Yes, sir.
Already for the calendar year, is that what we're counting?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
So one more, and it would come before, go to the building department.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
And what would, do you know what their steps would be?
Typically, my understanding would be that they would make a suspension pending a hearing in front of city council, who would make the final determination what actions would take place with that license from there.
And I was wondering, how many different complainants have we had on this?
1.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry, sir, we're,
No, it's me.
okay.
I didn't want to.
Duly
On
noted.
history, it's me.
Duly noted, sir. Any other comments or questions for the chief?
I think just to clean up the record, it was Mr. Klaus that raised his hand, because I'm like, who was that?
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
got it.
I will note in the record that
Okay.
it is Mr. Klaus.
Oh, I'm sorry, chief.
I apologize.
No, I do, I got, when we originally started this journey, one of the big issues that you had was that the current noise ordinance could not be properly enforced because you've got 25-year-old officers and they think noise is different than 65-year-olds think noise is. Under the current draft, we've got under paragraph 8 and paragraph 11, excessive noise and plainly audible noise. How are you going to deal with that as it's written? And does that need to be changed?
The way we would address that would be in that first definition part of it, unusually loud. So it'd be something that you're not used to hearing, would be how we would use that specific ordinance or that specific paragraph of the ordinance. Something that is absolutely abnormal that takes place, we would use that. Other than that, we would divert back to the decibels.
Okay, so the whole, for the most part then, paragraph 8 and 11 are meaningless because you got to use decibels or you don't know how to enforce it. Is that
Correct,
fair?
unless, again, if it's something totally
Sure.
out of the ordinary that happens, and I wouldn't say they don't happen, because we get some of those. And when they do, we would divert straight to that paragraph within the ordinance.
So a troop of dancing bears shows up at Mr. Klaus's house, that'd be unusually noisy.
I would definitely agree with that, yes,
Okay,
sir.
thank you.
So
you, Chief.
just for the record, for the public, would you mind reading sections 8 and 11?
Sure. Section 8, excessive noise. Any unnecessary or unusual loud noise or any sound which disrupts the peace and quiet of any neighborhood and which does annoy, disturb, injure, or endanger the comfort, repose, health, peace, or safety of reasonable persons of ordinary sensibilities. The problem, I think, is that the chief is saying is that's a vague definition because we're talking about this interfering with a reasonable person of ordinary sensibilities, and he doesn't have a way to define that. That's why we've gone to decibels. Paragraph 11, plainly audible, able to clearly hear a person of normal sensibilities, again, same problem, using only unaided auditory senses. Plainly audible shall refer to a sound heard at a volume level above that of normal conversation. That is another problem. Normal conversation. I had a guy on the porch 2 houses down from me, and he was speaking the way he normally speaks. And I could hear every word he was saying inside my house because he just had a big mouth. So, I mean, that creates yet another problem. And shall not include sounds which are just barely audible. With respect to music and amplified sounds, the detection of rhythmic, bass, reverberating type sound, beat, or cadence shall be deemed plainly audible. Again, that creates another issue, so.
The one thing that 11 does define for us is that last sentence, because your bass and rhythmic cadence that come with the bass won't be picked up by a decibel meter.
Correct.
And so this would give that ability, because sometimes it's the bass that's causing the issue. And if an officer is at a location and can feel the bass or hear the bass, then I think this would be in effect at that point.
I agree with you. The problem is at the beginning of that paragraph, it's then a personal normal sensibility.
Agreed, there's no
And so-
definition
So
of
it's a
that.
25-year-old versus a 65-year-old. But I get it, because I get bass at my house all the time.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
All right, so I just want to go through, you can see in the screen, so that we can all follow the conversation. You have this in your packet as well. Some of the sections that I have heard members of council refer to as maybe needing work. And I just want to facilitate a conversation to get feedback from this committee if there are any changes to this version that we want to make before we present this to city council later this month. Clearly, there was a conversation about the location of where the noise measurement was going to be taken. This committee really wanted to make sure that the noise measurement could be taken from the property of the complainant. Originally, we had that the noise measurement was going to be taken at the property line. We have since changed that to allow the complainant to decide anywhere within their property boundaries that the noise measurement can be taken. And this would address concerns about elevated floors, receiving more noise, the noise traveling much easier to elevated structures, and being able to facilitate the noise measurement to be taken from there. So we've made that change. Is there anything else that we would like to see in this section?
Is there anything that we need to say about having permissible location? Because if the noise is coming from high and the complainant won't let us in the house, then the default needs to be the boundary line, I guess is what I'm saying.
I would think that would be the police officer's determination. If he shows up and you're complaining about noise, all right, where's the noise? And
We
then he
already
can-
have, if you look at the last sentence, it says if measurement is not possible from the complainant's property, noise measurements may be taken at the nearest boundary line of the public right of
Okay,
way.
that's fine.
So I think that would cover that.
I'd like to get everyone's feedback and thoughts on the correspondence that Ms. Hack sent us at the end of last week. That we were asking for, and I think she agreed to share some of the findings of the sound study. Did you read that correspondence from her?
I did.
And what do you think it said?
I'm not a sound engineer, and it is a very technical recommendation. I would need more time and potentially seek assistance from a noise consultant that could maybe translate some of the recommendations that are made in that report. The only thing that they have provided to us is a 2-page recommendation for language in the ordinance. I've shared that with all of council. There are no findings. So you all know that they hired a sound engineer and they were going to conduct some noise measurements over some weekends. We have not received that. And I don't recall Ms. Hack saying that the full report was going to be provided to the city. I think that there was always, it was not very clear to us at the beginning what would have been provided to us. But since it's not our report, we can't demand that that study be provided to the city. It would be up to them.
So we can not we can't ask for clear, definitive layman's language out of the report. Just something that we could go on. We have to go with this very technical report that I didn't understand it at all, and it gave me nothing to go on to make a decision. And I wonder. Is it your thought that we're asking too much? That something to clearly delineate what's going on?
It would be helpful if they attend a meeting and they can have whoever prepared the report present those findings and those recommendations so that we could all ask them questions. But without that, I can't speak to a report we did not participate in, and a report that frankly, nobody in my staff understands. We're not sound engineers.
Right.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I've got some questions. First of all, I don't believe anything they've shown us so far would be considered a report. Okay, it was a memo in response to to our noise ordinance. And I have a number of questions, just like you do, on what the meaning and intention of that is, because I'm not a sound engineer, but I did some reading, and I understand that there are different approaches to sound analysis. One of them is a lot of it's geared towards industry and factories and machinery and what kind of noise is generated by that. The second thing is if it's a much more sophisticated kind of measurement than our little community can afford to do and is too complicated, then that's something that I got a little bit of idea that that may be some of what was coming through there. But I would suggest that we have a conversation back and forth with the resort, asking them for clarification. We haven't asked, so how do, that's all we're asked, that's all that needs to be done here. It isn't like a statement. And I understood as well from what the resort has told us is that the reason why we don't have a report, or I'm expecting an executive summary of the report at a minimum, is because they will be taking measurements over our busy season. We haven't had the busy season yet. So the busy season is over the summertime, and that's when they will be gathering more information and putting together, hopefully, a better response to us. It takes time.
We got a problem now. We got a problem with the noise
Right.
at the present time.
So we
And
need-
I've asked
Yeah.
several times to have all three parties in attendance at these meetings. The residents, the city, and the resort. I've asked it just about every meeting for the last 3 months.
Well, unfortunately, there was a death in the family of an important member of the resort, which has interfered with us having full access at this point. I think we need a little patience with that.
We understand that, and we certainly sympathize. I know I do, but I was thinking with a corporation as large as theirs, that maybe there could be some correspondence from some individual that could speak on behalf of the resort, and we're just not getting any information.
Well, I think what they're trying to
Yes, sir.
provide us is the best person, the most senior person available, and unfortunately, that's just had a
Yes, sir, go ahead.
unfortunate delay.
From my perspective, I mean, what they sent us was redacted. And I think that it was redacted. They have multiple opportunities to engage with us, and they haven't done so. We need to move forward with an ordinance. We already know that whatever we do is not going to be perfect, and it's going to have to be adjusted, no matter what we do. And so I think all we can do is move forward with what we think is the best ordinance possible, put it in place over this busy season, and we can revisit it in the fall. And at that point, perhaps Wild Dunes can come with their sound studies and their objections to whatever the new ordinance is.
I agree with that.
And the noise ordinance is going to apply citywide. So I think we
Yeah.
need to think about
Yes.
implications of the changes, not necessarily just between the residences that are adjacent to the commercial area at the resort, but also island-wide. And there are a few levers, I think, that the committee can, and city council can change and make adjustments to. It is easier to regulate amplified noise, prohibited during certain hours of the day. There's a section that I want to show you all to consider that was included in the Mount Pleasant City ordinance that was adopted 2 months ago about amplified music being audible from inside the residence. Those are things that could be included in the ordinance. The daytime and nighttime hours could be adjusted if 10 p.m. is too late for it to be considered daytime hours. That could be pulled back to 9 o'clock. So there are a few things that we could do to address at least the activity and the noise from the resort. I am just concerned that I don't think we will be able to have an ordinance that regulates the human voice. Some of the complaints are about celebrations, hoopering and hollering. I think that's going to be a challenge to manage and control in a resort. And we have to keep that in mind. This is a resort in a high-density area, commercial area of the island. So I just want to make sure we all understand sort of what can be done with this ordinance and manage expectations accordingly.
Again, I've asked several times that we send a message through the ordinance to that part of the island, the resort, make it separate from, like residents on 22nd, 23rd Avenue. It's high-density commercial activity going on in a residential neighborhood. But I've asked them for this several times, and, you know, everybody's pushing to pass this ordinance. I have a lot of misgivings about it. I think the decibel readings are too high.
Do you want to go, so that is the second section that I've highlighted for us to discuss, the maximum
Yeah.
decibel levels. Right now, as the ordinance is drafted, it has essentially three distinct areas with three different decibel maximum thresholds. We have residential and rental properties that would be all across the island. During the daytime hours, which is 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. Sunday through Thursday, and 10 a.m. to 11 p.m. Friday and Saturday, the maximum decibel threshold would be 60. For the commercial establishments, which would include, for example, the boathouse, the marina property, the commercial area of Harris Teeter, the Citadel Beach House, the Sweetgrass Inn, the resort, those would have a maximum threshold of 75. That's something that has gone, from 70 to 75. So that's another change that you all could consider, lowering that number. And that would be for daytime hours as well. Then do we want to stay here? And is there a different area? I guess back to Chair Ward's point about wanting to have a carve out for just the Sweetgrass Inn. So it carves it out by identifying commercial establishments. But again, like I said, it includes other commercial areas on the island. Do you want to create a third carve out just for the Sweetgrass Inn or not? Or do we leave it this way and have a conversation about the decibels? I have provided a matrix of other ordinances that are that include objective decibel thresholds, just for comparative purposes. So hopefully that is helpful, just to compare what we're proposed compared to other communities and how they've handled their commercial and residential zones.
So Desiree, you've got GC2 zoning at 85 and 55. Is that just in a different place?
Yes, so the GC2 exemption is included in,
Where's our table? I'm sorry, I don't see it.
can you give her this? We thought you were gonna Zoom, so I think.
I just, sorry, I didn't know either, so.
That's okay.
Apologize.
Here, section 5 on page 7 is where we include the maximum decibel level shall not exceed 85 dBAs during daytime hours in the GC2 General Commercial Zoning District, and that would apply to the section of Ocean Boulevard between 10th and 14th Avenue.
May I suggest that we put all that together under maximum decibel levels at subsection C?
Yes.
That way it doesn't look like it's hidden, and it's easy to find, and it just create less confusion down the road.
Yeah, we can do that.
Chairman Ward, I'd just like to say, we do have a carve-out for the Islander 71 restaurant, which was a separate agreement between the Islander and the community. I suggest that we go ahead with this ordinance as Councilman Hahn proposed, and assuming that if in the future this is not satisfactory with the Sweetgrass Inn, since it's a single location on our island, that maybe an agreement with them could be worked out separately outside of the ordinance. In other words, it doesn't have to be part of this ordinance, it's just an agreement between Sweetgrass Inn and its neighbors.
Well, that's fine, but in my experience is that they haven't been necessarily willing to come to the table and meet with us. So I don't know if that will change in the future.
Well, only thing we can do is move forward, and see what
Well,
happens.
when you move forward, I'm not for all this stuff.
I
Okay.
understand.
So, we have a discussion and changes and consideration. Consideration to me means that you're looking for a motion, correct?
Well, I want us to go through the ordinance and get an okay from the committee that the way it's drafted is how you want to present it back to council. When we did that last month, we received feedback from several members of of council that the ordinance needed work. We didn't get a whole lot of specifics, but I'm trying to get to the specifics so that we can make the changes to this ordinance to reflect what council wants to approve.
Well, isn't the main question the decibel level? Is that what you're looking for?
Well, there's the question about the decibel levels. There's questions about, do you want to adjust the daytime hours? Is 10 o'clock too late? 11 o'clock too late on Friday and Saturday? These have been the daytime hours and nighttime hours that the city has historically had, but I am sort of incentivizing a conversation to try to identify what needs work from the ordinance so that we can make the changes.
Okay, well, let's get to it. What's the discussion on the decibel level specifically from the committee?
So right now, we have 60 decibels during daytime hours for residential rental properties and 75 for commercial establishments.
Yes, sir.
From my perspective, Mr. Chairman, I would like to see us take out paragraph 8 and paragraph 11 because they're not enforceable and move forward with the decibel levels as they are. The reason being, it is easier to lower decibel levels if these are too high than it is to raise decibel levels if we end up being too low. And trying to look at the interest of all parties concerned, island-wide, I would see us taking it that way so that we're slowly regulating instead of a hard hammer with a very low decibel rating that may be too low. We don't know. I don't think anybody here knows the proper decibel levels.
Okay,
And I think, that's why I thought the matrix would be helpful, just to give an idea. This ordinance as drafted is very, very similar to other ordinances that have been adopted by other communities that have included decibel limits. They use the same scale, dBAs. So, another option that we discussed it several months ago is whether or not the city wants to hire a noise consultant. We discussed this, and the consensus of the group was that should be done by Wild Dunes. Well, they have, but we're not getting the report potentially. We don't know what all the findings were. If we go that route, which is certainly an option, it'll take us a long time. Whoever we have to find somebody to hire that's available. They are going to want to conduct their own studies. That could take months. Full disclosure, we have many options, but I think that there is a desire to get something done that would allow us to hopefully try to get some resolution to the situation.
very good. That's certainly an option on the table for me, but I would like to stay focused on these decibel levels at this point. I think there's two issues here: to move this ordinance forward or defeat it. And the first is, I've heard from Councilmember Hahn. I'd like to hear from Councilmember Anderson about her thoughts on the decibel levels.
Well, I think I've done extensive research on other municipalities, and I think these are reasonable decibel levels. In particular, I think the residential areas is probably the one that's most uniform across the board. 60 decibels during the day and 55 decibels at night. So if we want to start with something that maybe we can all agree on, is that agreeable? That we accept 60 decibels as a reasonable level for daytime activity, which is basically normal conversation, and 55 decibels at night, which is quiet.
Well, that's fine. I would like to know specifically the committee's thoughts on commercial establishments.
Okay.
The decibel levels. I would
Okay.
like to discuss that if possible.
If we're all in agreement with that, I think we can take that off the table then and go forward with the commercial. My opinion with the commercial is 75 decibels is a very reasonable amount for commercial areas, and that if there are issues with one specific location, that we can handle that with a separate agreement. Otherwise, they will be held to accountable with this ordinance.
Any response, sir?
No, sir.
So I think we take these as like little small motions. And is there a motion to accept commercial establishments at 75?
I so move.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? There being none. All in favor?
Aye.
Any against? Nay.
Okay.
Motion passes 2-1. Is there,
Now, do you think, if I may ask, Jimmy, do you think it's too high?
yes, absolutely.
All right, I'm just trying to understand. Thank you.
Okay.
So then we go to subsection 3, the evening hours requirement would be maxed at 55 dBs, and that would apply for rental properties, residential properties, and commercial establishments. So that would be across the board, 55 dBs during evening hours, 10 to 10 a.m. Sunday through Thursday, and 11 p.m. to 10 a.m. on Fridays and Saturdays.
Before we discuss that, I just wanted to be put on the record that there's no recommendations to change the GC2 zoning district decibel levels. There's no change to that. We're accepting that. It's, right?
I don't, I
Yeah,
mean,
that's exactly what we're doing.
Okay,
Okay.
I propose that we accept GC2 at 85 decibels during the day.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So,
Do y'all
but I'm
wanna
sorry,
accept-
Desiree, I just want to get that cleared up. Let's
No,
get
thank
back
you.
to the hours. I think that the hours that are being presented, that refers to all three of the districts and or properties establishments, right?
yes, so
I
this is,
think, my opinion, that 10 o'clock is too late for commercial establishments. And I'd like to see that rolled back, and I'd like to hear discussion from the committee on this.
I think 10 o'clock is reasonable for, quote, daytime hours in the evening.
How about on the weekends?
Weekends,
What's your-
11,
Okay,
that's reasonable.
are you good with that? Are you, Mr. Hahn?
Well, what would you propose? What are you thinking?
I would think, probably roll back to 9 and, every night. For commercial establishments, and commercial establishments include Sweetgrass Inn, correct?
yes, sir.
Yeah. The point I'm trying to make, I'm trying to hammer home, it's just too loud down there for people that live next to that property. And there's several of them that are involved. I know one that lives there, she's 92 years old, and she's closest to it. But she's not gonna come down here and, and talk to us about this. But I think we should respect her and her situation. I've been in her house several times. She's also a client of mine. And I've heard it. That's the point I'm trying to make. I don't think anybody in this room would live there, except for obviously two people that do presently. So that's the point I'm trying to make. 11 o'clock on a Saturday night, it's too late. But I'm one of 3 votes, so,
Well, I mean, I understand and very, very well what you're saying.
yeah.
I hate to admit that I go to bed earlier than 11 o'clock on Saturday nights a lot of times. And I can sit in my bed and I can hear the Soto House. But I know at 11 o'clock, it's going to shut down. And that gives me some comfort.
Okay.
So I don't know. I'm trying to balance everybody's rights at the same time. So, I go back to what I've said before. This ain't gonna be perfect no matter what we do. But I think it's better to be less restrictive, and then in the fall, if it's not working, tighten it up, than it is to try and do the other way, because the other way never really works.
Okay.
It's like taxes. They never give you taxes back.
That's right.
So that's my thought process.
Any further comments?
When, just as a comparison, I think it would be helpful. For example, the daytime hours for the town of Mount Pleasant are from 8 a.m. to 10:30 p.m. every day of the week. There's no distinction between weekday and weekend.
Yeah, I noticed that their hours, daytime hours, they're this 60 decibels, right?
That's correct,
60.
which is the same we have for residential and rental properties in our current
But that's
ordinance.
all of Mount Pleasant.
That's correct.
Okay.
Surfside Beach, their daytime hours differ depending on the location of, the different zones. Residential zones are 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. and commercial zones are 7 a.m. to midnight. So they have a higher threshold for commercial zones during the daytime, and a higher one as well for nighttime hours.
Well, I think, we could analyze this thing to death. And there's just a few communities, there's probably a lot more that we could look at would have different results.
That's
But I
correct.
appreciate the work the staff has done on this. I'd like to stay focused on the question at hand. And is there a motion to accept the hours as presented by staff?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any against? Nay.
So I want to go through subsection C, specific prohibitions. Right now, we have included pets, which we currently have in our existing ordinance, as well as mufflers, sounds coming from a motor vehicle's mufflers, and that's from the state code. Loudspeakers, hawking or peddling, again, these are included in our current noise ordinance.
Yep.
This is a new section that you don't have in the version that you have in your packet. But it was included in the Mount Pleasant ordinance, and I thought I would bring it before you all for consideration. If you want to prohibit as a specific prohibition, amplified sound that is plainly audible from inside of a residence or place of business, of a receiving property and not originating from the receiving property.
And what's your question of us?
Would you like to include that as a prohibition, that at no time can amplified sound be
Right, okay.
heard from inside a residence?
Personally, I agree with that.
Yeah, I think we go back to the same problem, the reason that we're sitting here is that we don't know how to enforce that. And so why have it if we can't enforce it? The purpose of this was to tighten it up so we had an objective line to know if the noise ordinance has been violated. What we're trying to do is support Chief Cornett and his boys, so they can do their job.
And I certainly want to hear from Chief Cornett about the enforceability. I guess what we were trying to find is something that would be reasonable for adjacent property owners. We've heard complaints about the noise from the resort when folks are at their crow's nest or outside in their screen porch during the day, recognizing that it is a resort and there is activity happening even when there is no noise. I think if the noise is heard inside of a residence when doors are closed and windows are shut, that certainly is understandable that it's very disruptive, because there's no relief, if you will, if you're inside your residence.
Chief, did you have anything to add on this?
What I see from this, I would basically make it more absolute. If I'm inside and I can hear it, it's a violation. That's easy for us to define and easy for us to enforce. You may have unintended circumstances from that result, but I think making it clear like that would take away the subjectiveness of it. If I can go in the house and I hear it, and it's a violation by ordinance, then it's
But-
clearly a violation.
I'm concerned that, first of all, age of the house would make a difference, old windows, new. The second one is it a quiet noise which you can hear but is not, how do you know that it's disruptive of your activities inside? Or is it a louder noise that would clearly be disruptive? Do we need a decibel level on this as well?
I'm going with the chief on this one.
As long as it's worded in an absolute way that if I hear it inside the house, there's no question, I heard it inside the house. If there's subjectiveness to it, that's where it gets difficult. When you start adding a reasonable, sensible person to it, there's no definition for that.
Yeah.
And so it would just need to be an absolute, either it's a violation if I hear it, or it's not in there, I think would be the way to put that, for us to take away the subjective enforcement part, which was our concern with the current ordinance as it stands.
So do you need a vote on this, or you just want an approval from council?
Yes, this would be in addition to the draft that you have been working on, so a motion to approve this language to be presented to council would be helpful.
I make a motion to approve this language.
Second, so we can discuss it.
Okay, discussion?
This whole thing troubles me because we're getting right back into the same box we were in before. And if it's just that you can hear it, then we basically put the decibel level at 0 inside a house. And I don't know how to deal with that. And I don't want to create a situation that is unmanageable for our police department or for our residents.
Further comments? There being none, there's a motion to,
Could I just clarify that? I don't know if the intent there is that the house is closed in, that the windows are shut, the doors are closed. It doesn't say that. I guess I read it to be that way, but I'm just assuming that you all are reading it the same way, that all the windows are closed. Obviously, if everything's open, you'll hear anything.
Yeah, that would have to be added, I think.
Yeah.
I would agree, because if your window's open, obviously you hear a lot more. And I think to
Yeah.
make it, if we're gonna make it an absolute, then you would want it with all the windows and doors closed.
okay, that will be added.
We can add that
So,
language.
we're in agreement, that's going to be added, and there's being no further discussion. All in favor of adding this language, say aye. Aye. All against?
Nay.
Motion fails. What other recommendations do you need from us, Desiree?
Can we have a motion on this, to remove paragraph 8 and 11 because of just they're vague under subsection A?
If you'd like to do so, that would be fine.
All right, well, I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
Just to be clear, we are eliminating
8 and 11.
8 and
Subsection
The discussion is that this does show up in a lot of other ordinances for some reason, but it appears to be something that must have been in an original ordinance that didn't get removed. Is that your reading of it?
I don't know. I think it's a holdover from the old
Yeah.
ordinance potentially.
Okay.
well,
But
Just-
it follows what we just talked about. It's the exact same issue.
okay. Just for the record, the town of Mount Pleasant and the town of Kiowa and Charlotte ordinance that we reviewed all include decibel thresholds and also include this as a part of the definition. But I can certainly, we can have a conversation with our legal team to determine what the recommendations are. They included it in the draft that they presented to us, so I would suppose that there's a reason why.
Sure.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second to remove these two. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All against? Nay. Motion passes 2-1. I would like to make sure that we address this, and going back to Desiree's conversation a few minutes ago, I'd like to see this committee make a recommendation to council, full council, that we hire a sound engineer to follow up, since we're not getting the information that I feel that we need at the present time.
Second.
Discussion?
Go ahead.
I have a problem with the sound engineering approach, because what we're getting is people who are dealing with a single unit location and a single issue. And there are two different ways to look at the sound problem. One is, as I said before, a factory or a single location, and the other one as from a community's perspective. It may be more helpful for us if we had someone who has worked in a lot of communities and sees how noise ordinances have been passed and implemented in other areas, and can give us information more about what is effective in communities rather than as a single source.
The purpose of the motion is not to define the person's qualifications on a narrow scope. It's more of a bigger picture of what we need.
I have a suggestion. Why don't we say sound engineer or noise ordinance consultant, something like that? And then we don't have to have specifically hire a sound engineer, but if there's someone else who could better serve us, looking at telling us how effective ordinances are in other areas. Just do an either or, and then you satisfy both of us,
How about an and/or?
and/or. Okay, got
Okay, the
it.
motion is and/or.
Well, as a scrivener, I hate and/or. It's and or it's or.
I know. All right, come on, you get a unanimous vote on this
Do you
one.
wanna- Do you want to put in either?
No, just we get either work. I don't,
All right.
I don't
Gotta
care.
go.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any against? Motion passes. Any other considerations at this time?
So the final section that I wanted to, well, two other sections I would like for us to discuss is the process by which a commercial establishment can come before city council to request and be granted an exception to the maximum decibel for that commercial establishment.
Okay. What specifically would you like us to consider?
I would like to confirm that the application process to receive an exception to the decibel reading would only apply to commercial establishments. There was a question at a previous meeting whether that would be allowable for residential or rental properties. We don't have to make it allowable for residential and rental properties. They could always be 60. And just allow an exception to commercial establishments for you all to consider whether a specific event could be exempted during daytime hours. It would work very similar to the city-sponsored event.
The committee understands the presentation by administrator. Is there a motion?
I move to adopt what Ms.
Desiree is fine.
Fregoso said.
Second.
Further discussion?
All right, so let me just make sure I understand this. We had before a limit on the number of permits allowed. Now we're taking that out, is that correct?
So at your previous meeting, there was a change requested by the committee. And we're looking at subsection H on page 7, permits for additional amplification.
Yeah,
And section C, limits on hours. That was changed. The original draft of draft ordinance included a limit of 15 hours in a calendar year that could be granted to a commercial establishment. That was changed at your last meeting to limit it to 5 days in a calendar year.
okay.
I think this was a result of a recommendation, if I'm not mistaken, from the resort. When
Correct.
they came and spoke before you all at your last meeting.
Just to make sure that we give you all the information that's requested this morning, I think those two items need to be discussed briefly but separately.
Okay, I'd like to add to that. In discussion with Councilmember Bogosian, he questioned whether we should have put a limit on the number of permits. Why not just have them come for permit application for every single event. I
Okay.
originally had suggested, I agreed with something like this, but I don't see any major difference between, each one has to submit a permit application anyway. And in this way, we're not necessarily giving the Boathouse 5 free permits or Islander 71, well, Islander 71 has its own, Islander 71 or the Refuge or anything else. So that way we have a better way of governing this as well. If a permit is issued 1 year and it's abused, let's use that word, then the next year the permit may not be renewed. So let's just make it permits, you have to apply for a permit if you want to exceed the decibel level amount.
So, Councilmember Anderson, if you look at the first section under age, application, it requires the application to be submitted to Isle of Palm City Council at least 30 business days in advance of the planned use. So it is, the intent is for each event that would.
Correct.
Each event that would potentially exceed the threshold for commercial establishments would have to be presented and approved by city council.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is in C, item C, limit on hours, permits for additional amplification at a commercial use property shall be limited to 5 days in a calendar year. Just take that out.
So what are we replacing it with? Do we
Nothing.
not want any
There's-
limits?
There's no limit. You have to apply for every event, and council would determine whether that is too many events or not for that location, whatever the number is, whether it's 1 or 5 or 10 or whatever.
It's, in my opinion, it's way too subjective.
I think what this does is a commercial establishment would know that they have 5 days in a calendar year that they can utilize for events or activities that would need an exception to that, to the decibel.
Is there a mechanism within the ordinance that if you have used up your 5 days, that you could still petition the council for an exception to that and get another permit?
There is not. If that is the intent, we can certainly add language to that effect
That
under
might
limits.
Fix that concern. It's 5, but then if, for whatever reason, there's some special whoop-de-doo.
Up to council discretion
council could-
to extend
yeah.
that.
Okay, I think that's the same thing. I agree with that.
I'm not for any exceptions. Is there a motion on this particular matter?
Wait, we still got something on the floor. We still have the motion for the, accepting the language about what she said about limiting the 5 days.
Yeah.
That's the motion that's currently on the floor.
I'm sorry, Nicole, would you repeat that, please?
What the motion was?
What the motion was, well, his motion specifically was to support
she
what she said. It had to do with applying this to only commercial establishments
Yes.
and not allowing it for residential.
So maybe take care of that motion
Okay, let's take
first
care of that
and-
motion.
All right.
Okay? So that is, it applies only to commercial establishments and not to any residential. Right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All in
So-
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All against? Nay. We just,
Okay.
Now you wanted more clear, specific language about,
Well, if
5.
that's a concern
So-
about something that the committee wants to do, I don't know if that's a big deal or not. It's just.
is there a motion?
So the question was, should we include language under section C, limits on hours, that would give council discretion and flexibility to approve events past the 5-day limit in a calendar year?
Is there a motion?
So move.
Second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
All against? Nay.
Claire,
Nay.
did you vote?
Nay.
Okay.
Any other concerns?
I don't know if there was consensus on and maybe there doesn't need to be, but Blair's point about moving the decibels for GC2, which I think is G5, to section C4 to be with the other decibel readings. I don't know if you need to make, I think we made a note of it.
I don't think you need a motion for that.
Yeah, we
We're
can-
not
everybody was
changing
good.
the
Everybody's
language.
okay with just moving that?
We're just shifting that
GC2
section.
exception to the other section, keeping it, just moving it to a different section. Okay.
Okay.
And then, under violations, I just wanted to have a conversation about that. Right now, section I and J are included in some iteration in our current ordinance. I would recommend that the city receives legal advice on the legality and process by which the city council could revoke or suspend a business license. Right now, the way that it's drafted, our current noise ordinance, it says repeated violations of any unlawful or conduct of unlawful activity within an establishment could result in city council revoking that business license. It's not specific to noise complaints, but any unlawful activity. And I think that we need to council needs to have a conversation about that. Is the
Do you
city?
think you can get an answer by the regular May council meeting?
We could ask our city attorney to attend the workshop meeting and provide some advice at that time.
Everybody's in agreement? Yes.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely, go ahead. We don't need a motion for that?
No, sir.
Right. Okay, have we touched all the bases on the changes to the noise ordinance?
It appears that we have.
Okay. I apologize, I have to leave for a family emergency.
Okay. All right, we're going to go on to item B, discussion and consideration of ordinance to prohibit e-bikes on the beach. And I was going to ask the chief of police if he had any thoughts on this.
So this is the proposed is very similar to North Myrtle Beach that they operate, and it alleviates the concern. So when we started looking into this, if you remember, Chair, there were a lot of people that want to ride the bikes. There's a lot of definitions about them. What I like about this is it clearly defines the bike. It clearly defines the ability to ride the bike during the off season, but takes away the risk that most of our residents are concerned about during that peak season when the beach is full. That would be the benefit to this one. And it's much like the leash laws. It's very articulable on the date that the ordinance changes. So I like this. It's enforceable. It's definitely something we can do on our end.
I agree. I think it addresses the main concern of these devices operating on the beach where the beach is more likely to be maxed out. So I think this is a good compromise to protect public safety on the beach and still allow some flexibility for those users to do so in a time of the day and times of the year that are most safer.
I agree with all that. My only concern potentially would be the time, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., maybe should be to 5 p.m., because that's when people typically clear off the beach. This is, because I know, Jimmy, you're concerned about this. I talked to some people about this yesterday, and the 500 kilowatt bike versus 750, he goes 30 miles an hour with his 500 kilowatt bike and laughs about it because the limit is at 750, and he says, we're going to very soon have a 740 kilowatt bicycle so that you're outside of that. And if you'll remember with outboard motors, used to be if it was 10 horsepower or more, it had different regulations.
Yeah.
That's why you have 9.9 horsepower outboard motors. And so people are getting around what's going on. And so I like this because it's all inclusive. It's just like, no, when there are people on the beach, you don't do this.
Would you, Chief, would you please state the hours and the dates for the people at home and may be watching?
Let me make sure I get it off.
I have it right here. May 15th through Labor Day, 10 a.m. through, it says 4 p.m., but we can make the change to 5 p.m. And those would be the times of the day, time, and during that period of the year that would be prohibited that those devices would be prohibited on the beach.
May 15th through Labor Day.
Yes, sir, from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m., if you all agree on that change.
That has not been determined yet.
No.
Is there do you propose changing?
I'll make a motion to change it to 5 PM from May 15th to Labor Day.
There being no second,
Then I guess that fails.
motion fails.
So it stays at 4 p.m.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your work on this, staff and chief. I appreciate it. It seems very reasonable to me. Moving on to new business, I'd like to make a motion to suspend the rules of order, and let's go with item B first, on update on acquisition of surveillance and safety equipment approved by council on April 25th. And I guess this would be, I need a second and a
Second.
and all in favor?
Aye.
And I'd like to ask the chief to give us an update here.
Certainly. So the ordinance will be on discussion tonight. The K-9 unit is an additional topic here today. The surveillance tower, we've got our officer that has submitted several grants for us. He's looking for grants to see what we qualify for that might be able to pay for that. In the meantime, we've already began to look at our beach cameras where we saw the blind spots, and we've already reached out to the company that manages our cameras for us to come out and give us some quotes on putting those out there and helping us to make sure we're putting them in the right places to accomplish our mission. So we're working with them. Captain Swain has kind of taken point for that. And then the drone helipad, we've talked with them. They actually are having a meeting today just to make sure that we understand the FFA or FAA guidelines on that and that they're all going to be met with this agreement. Should we move forward with that? The transport vehicle, the prisoner transport van, has already been submitted through a PO. It's been approved, and all we're waiting for is we'll get the check, and then we can pick it up tomorrow or Thursday, and it will be down here that day. It's already operational. I already went up there and turned it on and sat in it, made sure that the air conditioning worked in the back, which was very important to me, and it's already got all the equipment. So it is turnkey, drive down here, and we're ready to go.
Have you thought about, excuse me, have you thought about any place to park it in the upcoming days?
Yes, sir. It'll be visible
Okay.
for sure. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I won't ask any further questions. Go ahead.
Could we paint on the side Isle of Palms paddy wagon?
We would definitely, once we get it here, we'll have it marked to say transport van so that it's very
Nobody knows what a
obvious.
transport van means.
We'll make sure they know. Most of the people who need to know what it means.
Okay, very good. Any other questions? Thank you for that update. Yes,
I
ma'am.
would add, just for the record, and I think for those that are here watching, Chief, if you can speak to some of our ongoing efforts to work with our partners and neighboring communities to not only prepare for May 6th, but leverage resources to make sure that we have additional support throughout the season.
Absolutely. We met after this incident, the April 7th incident, as a county, we met and discussed how we can prepare for a summer where these types of events are probably going to happen on the different beach barrier islands. And we've got a plan with Charleston County Sheriff's Office and all of us that met to address that. Specifically for May 6th, we have state agencies, several, I can think of 3 or 4 different state agencies off the top of my head that will be here with us on May 6th. We have 3 local municipalities that will have additional personnel here. And then we will have, our intent is to have the command bus from emergency management, that same van that they brought down for managing the incident. It will be here. I believe we will have EMS, I hope, on standby with us for May 6th. But I can tell you I feel very confident that we have a large number of law enforcement officers that will be present here on May 6th. And we will have the transport van and a booking station ready to go. Anybody who decides to commit crimes on May 6th will be taken to the booking station and put into the transport van and transported to the jail.
I talked with Councilman Larry Kabrowski, and he's our county councilman at length last week, and he seemed to express to me that he agrees that this sort of behavior and the crowds is a regional problem. It's not, solely an Isle of Palms problem. And it appears to me, based upon what your report, that you're in agreement with that, and that we need some help from people who might not live here that come over and may want to cause some mischief. And we need some resources, a lot of it, from other entities. Are you in agreement with that, sir?
Yes, sir. I think we all agree. We've seen over the last several summers that these pop-up parties, they're not specific to Isle of Palms. They're not specific to the Low Country. This is a nationwide phenomenon that's taking place on both the East and West Coast. It's something that, as we see a growth in population in our area, people want to come to beaches, and that includes those that wish to do ill acts. And it is something that we as a region, as a state, as a county, have to be prepared to respond to and have those relationships with those surrounding law enforcement agencies to address it. There are other systematic issues that I think are in place, and things that when I went to the State House with the governor, talking about bond reform, talking about enhanced penalties for unlawful carry. There are a lot of things that we need our legislators to step up and support us and give us the tools and the ammunition to not only enforce laws, but to make sure that individuals who break the law are held accountable for breaking those laws. We've got a lot of work to do there, and something that I would certainly take any help from our council in accomplishing those goals. I would take any help you can give.
I was talking with a friend last week, and she was telling me about it's like a similar situation on the Gulf Coast of the Panhandle in Florida, where there's a lot of tiny, small communities, but the regional communities have gotten together and they have the same problem there. And they pull all their resources and work very closely together to keep things under control.
Yes, sir.
I thought it was very interesting.
And that's the same model that we are working with and we have in the past. Especially for like May 6th. When we know about it, it's easy to make sure we're prepared. But as you saw on April 7th, when we realized that we had a crowd, we called for resources, and resources came because we have those partnerships. And it is a regional issue, and we have to work together to combat the violence. It's not just violence here on Isle of Palms. It's violence in the streets in North Charleston, in Charleston County, and City of Charleston. All of us have to work together.
Right. Anything, Blair?
No, sir.
Thank you for that.
Yes, sir.
Okay, we'll go back to new business item A, discussion in partnership with law enforcement neighborhood support to establish internship program in the police department. I guess, Desiree, you'll take the lead on this?
Sure. So this was an offer that was made by the Law Enforcement Neighborhood Support Program that has been in place for maybe a year, a little over a year, or I think maybe coming up to 2 years. Fairly recent. And it's a nonprofit organization that is part of the Exchange Club, the local Exchange Club. And their goal is to raise funds and support our law enforcement and public safety teams here on the island. So they have come forward with a suggestion. They've already, they've worked this with the police department team to develop an internship program. We have had interns before. The only change this time is that they are offering financial support so that the city can offer a stipend to the interns. There would be an application process. Ultimately, the police department would select the intern, would determine what the intern would be able to do. There would be a job description and clear expectations. And they would receive a stipend, an hourly stipend for their work here.
From the city?
From the Lens program is going to make a donation to the city, and the city will pay that stipend to the intern, to the volunteer.
So it's 100% funded by Lens?
It is, sir.
Okay.
I got a problem with it.
Okay.
And this isn't going to be very popular. The problem is, in the past, Lens has made some expenditures that are not in my opinion, quite appropriate for their mission, and they're accepting ATAX money from us, and so they're taking our money and giving it back to us, or ATAX money back to us, and I get that. And their position is, well, we're not using ATAX money for things that are potentially not within our scope, but we're using other donations. And I don't like that logic, because money's money. And I'd like to have an intern. I'd like to support the police department, but I just got a real problem with how Lens is spending money right now.
Yeah, I've had some questions about accounting in the past with Lynn, especially when it comes to ATAX. How would you feel about not making a recommendation
Okay,
at this time?
sure.
We'll just turn it over, we'll bring it for full council and see what they have to say.
Sure.
Okay?
Are there any additional information that you all would like us to ask of Lens? I do know that what they have proposed so far is for the stipend would be funded by their private donations, not by the money that they have received from the $10,000 grant that was received, approved by the city for law enforcement support. But we can, if there's anything specific, please let me know so that we can ask them to come to the next meeting or address some of the accounting questions I think you mentioned.
From my perspective, we need an accounting. I mean, there are issues of a party, there are issues of, as I understand it, alimony or child support being paid. There are other issues that were being done that were not part of what I at least understood their mission to be.
Yeah.
So, but I don't want acute accounting. I want a real accounting of all the money, not just the money that we give them.
Yeah, I think there's been some discussion and questions by a member or members of the Accommodations Tax Advisory Committee on these very issues. So some things need to be cleaned up, made a little bit more clear before I would be ready to make a recommendation.
Agreed.
Yeah, and just for your knowledge, the ATAX committee for their next meeting, I've been working with the chair on that agenda, and there is a request for Lens and the IOP Chamber of Commerce to present an update on their expenditure of the grants provided last year. So we will have answers to those questions. I know the Lens program received an ATAX grant from the city. There was few specificity in their very little specificity in the application. They're a new organization, and I think members of the ATAX committee have similar questions as well.
Yeah, I would specifically ask for the Form 990, the federal Form 990, that is required of all 501c nonprofits, whether it be a C3, C4, whatever.
Okay, so we will pause on any of the city engaging in this partnership with Lens until all full council has an opportunity to weigh in on this.
Well, I would ask for the 990 from the Commerce Association too.
Yes.
Okay. Any further?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Miscellaneous business, there's none. Next meeting is set.
Wait. We've got K-9 unit discussion.
Oh, I got the wrong agenda.
5C.
Oh, I don't have that one.
Oh, I think you've had the draft version.
Must be.
Would you like, so we have on section C under new business, discussion of implementation of a K-9 unit in the police
By all
department.
means, yeah.
Chief?
So not
Thanks.
sure what questions you would have with it, but we have done extensive research with police working dogs. I have worked with them in several different capacities, both as a narcotics officer and as a special operations officer. And then as a chief in my old agency, we had a police working dog. It's something that is not new here. We look back and it looks like maybe the 90s, maybe the 80s, we had a black lab that was named Bear. And Bear traveled around to some schools too and did some presentations, but it was a narcotics detection dog and also used for public relations. We looked into some of the things that we would need to get this set up would be first approval, and then we would set up policies that outline what we would be looking for. And if there's a direction that council would be looking as far as what type of dog, you could train a dog, especially a police working dog, to do multiple different things. You can have a narcotics dog, you can have a gun sniffing dog, you can have a bomb sniffing dog, community relations dogs, cell phone dogs. I mean, you can have dogs these days that can find almost anything. There are also apprehension dogs. When you look at insurance, insurance will increase with an apprehension dog. Apprehension dogs are strictly monitored through the South Carolina Criminal Justice Academy. Something that we would be looking for would be a detection dog right now.
Apprehension, that would be like an attack dog?
It would be a dog that you can release
Send-
to
Yeah.
to
Okay.
attack.
Just
Now,
wanted
any
to make
dog
sure I
would.
understood.
I think the reality we have to keep in mind is anytime that you have a police working dog, they build a relationship with their handler, and if their handler's ever being attacked, I don't think it matters what type of dog it is. That's a relationship they have. That dog's going to want to protect them.
Sure.
But they don't get to just jump out of the car. You know, that would be something we have to keep in mind is purchasing a dog. It is cheaper to purchase a single dog or a dog that has a single function like detection. Apprehension gets very difficult, and all of them can also track. And they also, once they're tracked, you can certify them to be able to do an area search. So if somebody threw a gun, you can take that dog and they can work the area to find something that's been discarded. So that would be what we're really looking for, things like that, detection and the ability to find something that's been thrown.
Can you just talk briefly about, when you say canine unit, that is comprised of an animal and one individual, one officer that has a relationship with that animal, and then a special vehicle, I would assume, to haul the animal around?
That's
Is
correct.
that it?
Yes, sir. A unit would be just the team. Some people call them units, some agencies call them
Well,
teams.
is there a kennel? Do we have to provide a kennel for the dog, or does he go home with the
He goes
handler?
home with the handler, and that would my experience has been that we provide a kennel at the house where the handler lives, so that they can take care of it. One of the costs that gets associated with it is every day that the handler is off, they get 30 minutes of work for kennel maintenance and taking care of the dog. A lot of time you can flex that out with their schedule. The other difficult part is the 16 hours of training that you want to get each month. And typically you do that by partnering with your local agencies, which a lot of our departments around us have police working dogs, and we would partner with them to get those training hours in there. And then it also opens the door for them to come here and train with us as well.
Is there, because you have days off and vacations and things like that, is there a way to either do a mutual aid with another agency or something so that we're always covered, or are the officers that we have on call?
Well, we would typically do an on-call, but we could also do a mutual aid where we can request a canine. For example, for May 6th, North Charleston and Mount Pleasant are providing police working dogs for us to have available out here. I think North Charleston's will actually be on site, and Mount Pleasant's will be roving and available to call if we need them.
And this is an aside, but if interested, I'd contact Elliot Summy, head of the Aviation Authority.
Yes, sir.
They have dogs, and he's very interested in outreach within his police department, so that might be another source for you.
We did reach out for them for May 6th. Unfortunately, they had another calling that they had to deal with first. But that is something that we've been working to foster that relationship with them as well.
Thank you.
Good.
Are there any specific questions about the K-9 program? or-
How long do you think it would take to get it operational?
The first part would be the policies. Policies are easy because I've already set policies for this before. It's not something brand new for me. The hard part, the longest part, is getting the K-9 and the officer certified together. That's typically going to be about 2 months for certification. And then the insert for the patrol vehicle, you buy that and you have to have that inserted in. It's not going to be extremely expensive to do that, and that's something that will probably take about a month, but could happen while the handler is preparing and while we're searching for the dog, because it's important to make sure that we are getting a dog that can build a relationship, that it's the dog that has the drive that we're looking for with our partner. So I would say within 6 months, from the time we get a go-ahead, within 6 months for sure, we would be operational, maybe before then.
Good. Yes.
Just a question. Chief, I know you've dealt with this before in your previous police departments. Any downsides, any unintended consequences that we need to be aware of ahead of time so that we can mitigate it?
The difficult part was, in my previous agency, we only had 8 officers. And so sending that one officer off for training for 16 hours a month was a lot more complicated than it sounded. We were able to make it work, and we have a bit of a better advantage here, but that is definitely one of the hard parts, is making sure they get those hours of training, but also the understanding that they can do training here while they're on the shift as well. You can certainly put things out, and it takes a little bit of work getting used to it and building it up, and that can be, it can seem difficult and can seem cumbersome in the beginning, but it is something that can be overcome.
When the handler decides to, find a job somewhere else in another department, what happens to the dog?
At that point, you would pair the dog with another police officer, and they can go through a certification course together that's not quite 2 months. The long part of the initial certification is the dog learning what they're looking for. And then the officer just learns to read the dog for a change in behavior. And so we would need to do a smaller training at that point. But one thing that we do notice is it is rare when a police officer becomes a canine handler that they move on. And a lot of times it's because they are committed to the relationship they have with the dog, and it's a partnership. And a lot of times they will stay until the dog is retired, and then they will make any moves they're going to make. But by that point, they're typically pretty invested in the agency.
Thank you.
Very good.
I've got one, Ms. Laney.
Sure, go ahead.
So we're moving to miscellaneous business. Chief, we received an email from a citizen, and I've since had other citizens ask me about this. I just wanted you to address. Saturday afternoon, the police department was responding to calls on Palm Boulevard, and they were running at very high speeds. And that was concerned residents because they were assuming they were 70-mile-an-hour plus speeds. So if you could just tell us what was going on so everybody knows.
Certainly. I'm not sure how fast they were going, but it was an emergency call that came in due to a home alarm that is activated during a hostage type situation. So you have a different code you could put in. And so that code was put in incorrectly. And we always respond and treat that as though it is a true hostage-like situation or a home invasion. And that's why they were responding at a faster speed than normal, just to get there.
Thank you. That clears it up, just people wanted to know. And so I would assume a hostage code coming to you would be very similar to, say, an active shooter.
Correct. You got to get there fast because you can, moments dictate what can happen there, and people's lives will be on the line if it is in fact a true home invasion or hostage situation.
Thank you.
Very good. Our next meeting will be at 10 a.m. Tuesday, June 6th. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.